weekend we can get back in the studio and start recording.
Okay, great, fantastic. All right, well, just hit me off, keep me abreast, let me know what's going on.
Okay, cool. I just want to touch base with you.
Okay, how's everything else going? All right?
Yeah, good, man. Good. Just they working me like a one-armed slave at work, but
Yeah, well, you're better than most. You're better than most, bro.
It just increased our work exponentially, and just trying to get adjusted to that.
Sure, acclimate yourself to it. Well, you can do the heavy lifting, bro. I know you.
Yeah.
Well, we're in a new era now, bro, ain't we?
Yeah.
Okay, look, I got a production that I'm getting ready to run, so I'm gonna hit you back, or we'll get back with one another. Keep me posted on that, all right?
I will, man. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Peace and love. Good day. I'm Jonathan Bay, and this is Moorish Directory, MoorTalk. This is episode 12, and what we're going to do, the reason I'm not wearing my fez, and excuse the conversation in the beginning of it, but I wanted to let you know that this talk is relatively informal, but extremely important, okay? You just saw me walk through the door, coming from my residence, from my home, into one of the 3 rooms in the production facility, multimedia audio production facility, Track Crafters, of course, 100% Moorish owned and operated. And so it's very convenient for me to leave home and get to work. And wanted to show you somewhat of the environment in a less highly produced manner, so that we can somehow have an atmosphere that is congenial, conversational, comfortable, because I would like to provide some information that all Moors should be aware of, but I want to do so within this environment that is going to be more cohesive and profitable to convey the information in a manner in which you may hang in there and pay attention and benefit from. So at any point during your viewing of this conversation, matter of fact, I might even suggest that you pause it right now. Go ahead and get your paper and your pencil and go ahead and begin taking notes on what is about to be conveyed. Now, the reason I'm not wearing my fez is because it is not formal or ecclesiastic in nature, but I am wearing the cap that I usually wear when I'm here in the studio. And I'll show you the front and the back. Okay. Now, the reason I wear this is to keep myself mindful of what I feel is, in my opinion, an extremely important attribute and virtue: patience. The subtopic of today's conversation is going to be speaking about, we're going to be going into the area of understanding adept chambers, or an adept chamber, what it is. An adept chamber is a group of individuals, a collection, a collective of individuals who are possessing an extremely high degree of knowledge in specific areas. You can think of that collective similar to the professors at a university or college. Each professor with their own particular degree, doctoral or what have you, in a specific discipline. One might be etymology, one might be physics, one might be law, one might be history, one might be astrology. All of these individuals with their own adeptness within these particular disciplines collectively make up the adept chamber. But keep in mind also that even though you may have an adept who is extremely proficient and an expert in a particular area, let's say etymology or astrology, you can also be rest assured that they have an extremely high level also of knowledge on all of the other disciplines, be it law, history, theocracies. This is the nature of adepts. They may have a particular passion, but you can always be rest assured that they will also have an extremely high level of knowledge with respect to all of the disciplines, because all of the disciplines connect. None of them are not related to the other. So they have to have an adept understanding of all of the other disciplines. There are no disconnects. However, they may have a particular passion. Case in point, my particular passion is in metaphysics. Okay? Now, the term meta in the beginning is meaning that it is not exoteric in nature. There's esoteric and there's exoteric. Okay? Esoteric means that most people would not understand it. Exoteric means that the general public probably would have an understanding or a belief in this particular subject. Okay? So when I say metaphysics, okay, I'm saying that these are things within the realm or science of physics, the study of cause and effect, the study of reality, the study of the atomic structure of things, the nature of operation, the functionality, the operative functionality of things, on a level that the general public or individual would not necessarily have a common understanding of. In other words, things that were probably not taught in school. Okay, that's my passion. And the reason that this particular MoorTalk episode 12 is so important, and one of the reasons that, first of all, one of the reasons that I'm recording this is because I've been receiving a lot of phone calls in which, unfortunately, I'm finding myself having a very similar conversation, long conversation, with an individual or a group of individuals, or I might get a call to ask to be on a particular blog talk radio program or a phone conference or things of that nature. This, for prosperity, I'll be able to refer people to this particular episode instead of having the same conversation. But more importantly, it's because this information that I'm going to impart to you is information in which all Moors should know. And unfortunately, there are not enough places in order for you all to receive this information. What I'm going to provide is some of the information that you should be receiving in the Moorish science temples, or from your sheikhs, or those that profess to be your adept elders. But unfortunately, that's not occurring. So we need to have a means and mechanism by which to get the information out there, because the information is what is important, not the individual providing it. This isn't about me. This is about you. Okay. Now let's talk, let me go ahead and before we get into that, I want to let you know, and as I said earlier, in my opinion, patience is a virtue. And I'm going to pull up here on the computer screen to show you all that there has been a great deal going on over the course of the last few months, expanding and fortifying our Moorish American community's infrastructure. If you go to Google and you type in, let's say, Google Play, apps, we go actually to where the download area might be for apps. What you do is you go down to, I think we could probably just start from here and simply type in more and click the search command, and you'll see here the More app. Okay, and you can download this to your phone, and in it it's going to give you immediate access to many of the more substantial websites within our infrastructure. RV Bay Publications, Sister Annie E.L.'s site. You're going to have access to the Moorish directory, all at a push of your finger, but there's a lot in there. This is not an advertisement for that, but this is to let you know that there are resources in our community that are part of the infrastructure that are being created for your benefit, free for you. Okay, this is not, of course it's something of value. Don't simply think that because something has been created for you and it's free that it's not of value. We could have easily put a price on this that would be worthy of the technology, but it's more important that you have it. Okay, so you can get this from Google Play, or you could go to the App Store, Apple. We have it there as well. We pay fees to keep it online and available for you to have free. Okay. Another matter that's been going on. Let's go there. We're going to type in activemoors.com. Okay. Now, here at this particular site, activemoors.com is the same type of environment that you would have on Facebook, okay, that was developed by Zuckerberg, okay, a gentleman of European descent. This activemoors.com is a site for your community, as it says right there, to provide your Moorish community the safest, most enjoyable and productive online social experience possible. We ask that you please always remain mindful to conduct yourself in an honorable manner, always respecting one another within your Moorish American community's premier online social network. All right. There'll be a place in which you can go and find Moors in your local area, so you're not feeling as though you are an island, isolated. So what we're putting in there, and what will be in there within the next week, is for every region, state, hamlet, and town, we're going to have an area in which you can go to and meet up with other Moors in your local area. This is free as well. There's no fee, there's no charge, there's no yearly or monthly access fee. All of these things are paid for, okay, already by another device within the infrastructure. It pays for a great portion of not only these growing infrastructures, the Moor app, which I just showed you, or activemoors.com. But it also pays to keep the lights on, keep them functional, keeping them there for you, okay? As well as such free books as Your Right to Write, The Right Writ Right. Now, that book is in a PDF form, and it has technology within it that allows for you, as you're reading, if you don't understand something, you can hover over a word. It'll give you the definition of the word. You can click on it and you can find out about the history of that particular section of information that you're reading. It's in a format for Mac as well as PC, okay, and took about, well, better than a half a year to create for you free, because writs are an important aspect, an important tool, important mechanisms of response relative to the cause and effect of something which may have transpired or something in which you want to effectuate, make occur. All right. So, patience being a virtue is that these modern era devices are aspects of your Moorish American infrastructure being developed so that you will have a greater degree of opportunity to prosper within a world that you deserve living in. All right. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump back and begin this talk. As I said, this is an informal conversation, and we're going to be focusing on my particular area of passion, metaphysics, which in my opinion, many of you have heard me say, is true Moorish science. This is the information that you should be getting from at least one of your professors within, or adepts or elders within the Moorish Science Temple. The Prophet was very specific when naming the temple. He said Moorish means for us. Science temple. So the operative and most functional and definitive aspect of that name is informing you that the essence of what's being provided within that structure, the temple, within the organization for our community, Moorish community, is science. Okay? And that word constitutes the nature of the material that will be provided in there. But don't twist it. That doesn't mean I'm saying by any means that the etymology that might be taught in there is of any less value, or that the history, or that the professor who is speaking on the law or legal functionality and ramifications, articulations of what might be needed to know in order to navigate through a particular maze of constructs that have been put there to prevent you from exercising fully your rights, civil rights, those dynamics of the code and statute made man, corporate restrictions that have been placed upon you, or any other aspect of real law, du jour law. Okay. which is actually your human rights. That's why there's a difference between civil rights and human rights. Because civil rights are those that have been bestowed, okay? Or someone has said, well, you have these by our grace. Human rights are the rights when you say all rights reserved, okay? There's no need to be putting in UCC numbers. That just stands for Uniform Commercial Code. And no one listening to this is a piece of commerce, a product, okay? So UCC doesn't matter to anything. If you jot down UCC 104 or whatever like that, all rights reserved, you don't need to do that, okay? Because what would not someone understand about the word all rights reserved? So that's all you need to put, all rights reserved. You don't have to be specific, especially about a commerce code, okay? When you say all rights reserved, you're talking about your God-given, inalienable human rights to exist, right to life, okay? Freedom. The pursuit of those things which magnify the quality of your existence. All right? So I don't want to get too hung up in that. Because our topic today is metaphysics. Okay? So let's have at it. Welcome back. I'm Jonathan Bay, and this is MoorTalk Episode 12. Now, as I had said a little bit earlier, this is going to be a little less formal than some of the other MoorTalks. And the subject is metaphysics. However, we need to speak in the terms of physics to help one to appreciate the dynamics of the meta aspect of physics. It's also important to know that one cannot know these things to be fact unless one experiences the meta aspect of physics, which takes years of practice. In any science, there are methodologies, there are rule sets, there are means by which things can only be done. The fact that I am not a scientist who has a credentialized doctorate, let's say, in physics, does not in any manner mean that the information I am providing is any less valid. However, I highly respect the leading physicists who have the same view as I with respect to the metaphysics aspect of what I'm going to explain to you. One of those, matter of fact, is a gentleman by the name of Tom Campbell. You might hear me quote or paraphrase, perhaps, some of the aspects of physics. He's a physicist, okay? Whereas as a practitioner of metaphysics, the knowledge that I have acquired over the course of decades comes from practice and becoming a practitioner of metaphysics. If I speak of something which is biological in nature, dealing with the objective realm, I'm not speaking from the advantage or position as a individual who has a doctrine or is a doctor of biology. However, I still nevertheless appreciate those who are credentialed that have a similar or the exact same view as I as it relates to biology. And my understanding of biology, of course, has come from others, as all learning does. Be it your teacher or be it your own research, independent research. As I said, it can be in the realm of academia or self-learning. It doesn't matter what's important or the source where you're receiving it. As long as it's a valid source and the information that you receive, you do your absolute best to verify it. Even me. Don't take my word for it. Research it. After you hear what I have to say, go out there and get into it if you have an interest to do so. You'll find that what I'm saying, of course, is true. And is also, as I've mentioned earlier, an aspect of the material that should be taught within one of the classes of by professors, knowledgeable ones within the Moorish Science Temple. Those that have followed MoorTalk for some time, you've heard me for years and years on my soapbox, harping over and over again that it is of my opinion and belief, and I feel knowledge, which is knowing what was alleged or previously spoken, as well as my own personal experiences in the metaphysical realms that provide me with that knowledge. I have said in this objective realm, this perceived reality, that the uplifting of fallen humanity will not be effectuated by by us through the objective realm, but will be effectuated through the subjective realm by us. All right, so as I said, if you have something to write with or paper to write on, now is a good time to start applying it, because you'll want to take notes. And stop this if you need to and go back and listen again and again if needed. But it's important that you get this information. And as I said again, this is one of the aspects of things that should be most definitely being taught to our children within various realms of academia, as well as within our own Moorish Science Temple, Moorish Science Temple, because we are talking science here. Now again, the objective realm, which deals with cause and effect of the perceived reality objective world where objects exist, is a derivative of that which has come out of the subjective realm, which is consciousness-based reality. All is mind. All right? So let's begin and hang in there. Stick through the minutia and you'll understand. Okay? So, all right, here we go. As it turns out, consciousness is is the deepest root of physics. That's where it all begins. Consciousness is the super system It's the big picture. So if we start with consciousness, from there on, you have just two assumptions: that consciousness is, that it exists, and evolution exists. And by evolution, we mean a very generic type of evolution, that large, complex systems that are self-changing will change for their own benefit. Okay, that's kind of the idea of evolution. So if you start with those two assumptions, all of the rest you can derive. From there, you can derive not only our local perceived reality, you can derive the nature and the basic facts and physics of reality, and the why. Why is it here? Why are we here? What's the point? Okay. You can then go on to develop the physics from those two assumptions. Quantum mechanics, based upon an assumption that matter at the micro level is just probability distributions. And as it turns out, matter at the macro level, physical higher level, we can see, and it works the same way as it does in the micro and macro level, are exactly the same as far as operation goes. You can derive relativity, which is based on one central fact, and that is that the speed of light is a constant. It's represented by the letter c. Okay, it doesn't matter the velocity at the source. The light from that source always travels at the same speed. It's a constant called c. And from that fact, special relativity falls out as just algebra. And then general relativity falls out of that spectrum as well. The reason that you see the changing and the lighting and perhaps a bit of my positioning is that I had to change computers. So the time difference as well as the lens difference is making that difference. I was recognizing that the system that I was using that was here, this is a new system now, or not a new system, but a different device. The other one was not as powerful as this one. So it might even look a bit clearer, I'll find out later, but I had to take the time to render out the other one to make sure that I wasn't going to lose any data, and then take a look at it and make sure that everything was in place, and then go ahead and reconnect this one and begin again. So apologize for that, but I just didn't want, there to be a big change and then wondering what went on. So, but I'm going to try to go back to where I was. And we were talking about constants and the extrapolations of information and how we could come to certain assumptions and understandings based upon these constants. And that constant was C. Okay, and that's a key piece of knowledge, that C is a constant, And it was a big mystery, like, well, why should particles be distribution possibilities? Well, it's better to understand that when you recognize that this is a virtual, objective reality, okay? A simulation that works by what's called a delta t, a very small period of time, which, like in computer games, updates itself. Very small number. It's like 10 to the minus 0.343 seconds. Very small increment. Very fast turnaround. Okay. I think it would be 30 some order of magnitude smaller than we can measure. Very, very small increment of time called delta t. So in a delta t, one delta t, you can move one piece of matter from this spot, to the next adjacent spot. But that's as fast as matter can move, because that's how fast it can move. It can have to move at the constant, which is the speed of light. Okay, that's the measuring point, is speed of light. That's how we measure time. Okay, and how many delta t's can move within, like frames through a picture frame in the cinema. Okay, I wanted you to pause here to marinate on a concept. Okay, envision, if you will. You're in a totally blank room. A background, let's say that the background is just white, and the floor is white, and there's nothing in the space except for you. Okay? You're the only thing that's in the environment, nothing else other than white light, let's say. Okay? Think of the movie Matrix, when Neo was taken by Orpheus to a location when he was explaining the Matrix to him. And it was blank. That's where he, said, this is the Matrix, and then he, pulled up a bunch of racks of things, machine guns on racks and racks and racks, okay, that just kind of came in. Okay, so think of it as an empty space like that, and it's just you, the individual, in this vast emptiness, standing there in a totally white room, okay, just for your own visualization. And then what appears in front of you is, let's say, like a screen door, okay, or a door made out of plastic, something similar to the type of plastic that you would have in a movie projector, okay, almost clear, let's call it translucent, something you can see through. But on this doorway, okay, or this thin sheet of filament, you see an image, like a picture, like the separate pictures that would go through a movie projector. Okay, so you're looking through this one snapshot of time. That singular snapshot of reality at that moment, or perceived reality at that moment, that is on that piece of plastic about the size of a doorway, is called a delta T. That's how small the snapshot of time is in that picture that you took. It's not a moving picture, it's just a snapshot. That's a delta T. And then now envision that you're standing there and you're looking at this filament, this plastic, and you notice that there's now another to its right with another snapshot, just a little bit different than the one that was previously there to its left. And then you notice that there's another on the other side, almost exactly alike, but varies just a little from the original one in the center. And then you realize that you began with one, and then you had another and another, and then another and another, and another and another, until you were encircled by these, let's call them doorways or windows. Okay, just clear sheets or filaments, snapshots, delta T's, snapshots of time in very small incremental periods. And then you realize that the first one, now it appears as if there's another one behind it, and then behind it, and behind it, and behind it, and behind it. And the same is true with all of the other filaments that are now encircling you. So you have all of these different snapshots of time, all of these various delta T's, and you're in the center. Perfect circle. And behind each one of the delta T's is another, and then another, and another, extending as far as the eye can see. And the first delta T is a snapshot of time at that moment, and the one behind it is a snapshot of time, a delta t later. And then the next one is a snapshot of time, a delta t later than the previous, and on and on and on and on. So, if you move through like light, which is the constant, traveling at the speed of light through these images, it would, to your perception, be perceived as time moving and things occurring. But it's not a one-dimensional, it's multi-dimensional, two-dimensional in its makeup. So now you feel as though you're in an environment. It might just be an environment where you're sitting in a chair. You're not moving, you're not walking, but you're just sitting there. But time is passing as you're sitting there. The delta T's are streaming by you. And you're looking around and it looks extremely real. And you have a sensation of, you can smell things, you can actually touch things, you can feel things going on. But you're just going in a straight line. What if you could decide to go right or left within this maze of continual delta T's? Well, you can, because that's called free will. And as your consciousness is traveling through these delta T's, or the delta T's are traveling and you are in a stagnant position, and you are moving and interacting in a manner in which you wish to through free will, that's going to be the determinant factor as to where you are within that field of consciousness or perceived reality. Okay. Those delta T's are the increments of time. Okay. But the filament itself are what you call collapsing probability waves. This might happen, or that might happen, or that might happen. But they do not occur until you reach that delta T. Which would mean they all have a probability of occurring depending upon how you wish to travel within it. And as you travel through that particular environment, perceived environment, doing the things you do, you are the cause of the effect, having these snapshots of time pass by as the situations that you are experiencing occur. And the reason they occur is because those are probability waves collapsing into reality. Right? That's an explanation of physics relative to how we perceive this reality. The mechanics of it. Now we could start going into vortex mathematics and explain that how these things actually do occur, which, I will do that. But for right now, let's just stick with the fact that the consciousness is the superset, the true reality, and this classroom in which we, by our own volition and choice, placed ourselves into, is like us in a video game where we have forgotten that we are actually the player and now we are the piece, and we've forgotten. It's just like when you wake up from a dream. You want to try to hold on and remember that dream, but it starts to fade like water running over a sugar cube. You just can't hold on to it. The same, of course, is true relative to when you left the realm of total consciousness and entered into this virtual space of perceived reality, there was a disconnect over time as to the part you play, the role. And you have, over time, forgotten completely as to the true reality, and now you feel as if you are actually existing in this objective reality. Okay, so anyway, sorry for the segue, but I needed to do that at least to explain a little bit more about the delta T's, how time operates relative to consciousness. Okay, and that it is like, an old movie projector in which light is simply going through, and the projector filaments are going through the machine, showing you different snapshots. And it appears as if it's now animated. Okay, so let's take a look at now, those probability ways and go further. Okay, so if you want to run back and allow for that to marinate a bit, that's quite understandable. Please take the time to do that. But we'll do a little recap and then we'll move forward, so that these concepts, which may be new to some or many, can be firmly understood. Okay, so we know that c is the speed of light. Okay, that's the program operates at a particular speed. That's the constant, which is the speed of light. And we have discussed the fact that matter can only move at the speed of light. And the increments in which that matter moves, it could be a photon. A photon is one little pellet, a BB of light. It's called a photon. You can go on the internet, look in YouTube, and type in in YouTube, and type in light in a bottle. Okay, they have cameras so fast now they can shoot one photon, one BB of light into a Coke bottle, and you can actually see it enter the Coke bottle and then bounce around like a pearl of light inside. Okay, each of the movement within that film of the light moving is a delta T, because that is as fast as the particular physical molecule, the matter, okay, which in this context is light, called a photon. That's how fast it can move. Okay, it's just important to get these basics, because we extrapolate everything else out of the basics. So now we're driving physics. And, once you understand these basic ideas, what physics has done is they started working out the math without a clue as to why it should be like that. And why are particles probability waves, But we know if we make that assumption with these exercises that we'll get certain results, cause and effect. But they were always starting within the subset, opposed to the superset. To know the why of the what, you have to start from the superset. Okay? And the superset is consciousness, a digital information field. And this is a virtual reality. So if we start with consciousness and we understand this natural system evolving, still evolving, okay, we're a part of that evolution. And then all the science, all the physics, the science, the biology, and the rest of it will start to come out as logical deductions. Okay? And it also explains, about the paranormal, as we mentioned. the paranormal is just normal, once you understand it from the superset. It's nothing para, it's just normal. It's the way things work. Okay. It's repeatable. You can do experiments, and the paranormal is not paranormal. Okay. We know, as stated previously in other videos as well, that placebo effect works. That's mind over matter. Okay, they may not know why. They're still working within the subset. May not know why it happens, but they know that if you do these things, you have control group and the rest of it, that you'll have people that will basically heal or cure themselves. That's mind over matter. And these things have been happening over centuries, and it's considered as either mysteries or supernatural, but it's not that it's supernatural or paranormal. It's just so super that it's natural, because it's natural, and that's super, but misunderstood by some. So you can solve these mysteries, when you understand more about the system, the greater system. It's like the Buddha, again, in his spouting of poetry, he says, reality is an illusion. Well, Einstein said the same thing, row your boat, life is but a dream. We could go on and on, okay, but it's all saying the same thing. And you have to understand that dynamic, that field, that highly evolved consciousness is love. And we are in the process of evolving towards that. And when you understand how the mechanism operates, it all makes sense. Okay? And understanding that this virtual objective reality is not the only, there are others, okay, which you might consider as dimensional states, things of that matter, but they're just as real as this one, okay? So of course we have to also, deal with when we're in the objective realm, we're going to have to be dealing with the biology of this. And biologists, have to also look at the mechanical, if you will, aspect of, many of them are trained in Newtonian physics. And things are based on those premises, okay? Chemical, physical relationships, okay? A cell is a composition of biochemicals, okay? And they viewed it just as a machine, so to speak. But the interesting thing about it is what they were teaching before is that the machine itself, they used to call it a reductionist system controlled by DNA. And they taught a thing called genetic determinism. Okay, that the genetic blueprints determine the fate of the character and the human. But that's an unfortunate way of teaching, again, because that then places you in the position as a victim, that you're a victim of your genetic makeup, because we can't change the genes that you're made with. So they had been given in education a belief system, a theocracy, believing that genes control us. But then by believing that, you're getting rid of your own self-empowerment. Okay, I can't take care of my own healing. Physician, heal thyself, so to speak, because they believe in something other than the fact that one can. Okay, so if we look at something as simple as stem cells, okay, multi-potential cells. Once the moment you're born, and there's now an embryonic cell. You can't call it an embryonic cell once you're born. Okay, you can call it a stem cell, but it's the same thing. I'm not talking about birth. I'm talking about born. In other words, coming into this physical dimension. Okay, so you can take one simple stem cell by itself, and it divides every 10 or 12 hours into maybe 50,000 cells in a petri dish. And all of the 50,000 are genetically identical. And then you take that 50,000 and you split them into 3 separate dishes, and you change the environment. And you use a culture medium. It's like an aquarium that you have a fish in. That's the environment, just like the petri dish. And so the medium that you put in is the environment within the dish. And you put all of these cells that came from the exact same, they're all identical. But you'll find that in one will have muscle cell, one will form a bone cell, and one may have, a fat or blood cell. The only thing that's different, because all the cells were identical, the only thing that's changed is the environment. The gene didn't determine it, but that's what they were teaching, that the gene would determine what the cell was, but it's not. They also taught that the nucleus of the cell was a depository of the cell for all of the genes, so it was kind of like represented the brain of the cell. Okay, but that's not true. The nucleus is the gonad of the cell. It has blueprints. DNA doesn't have self-actualization. It doesn't turn on and turn off. It doesn't have its own free will. Okay, genes are blueprints. They have no self-actualization. They're not self-determinate. Okay, it's just a piece of coded information. So the important thing to find out is, well, who's a contractor that reads these blueprints? Okay, so that's going to take you out of the nucleus and have you look at the skin or the shell of the cell, okay, which is a membrane, okay, and the inside is a soupy cytoplasm, okay. And they used to just think that was, just a kind of like a saran wrap, something that just held it. But in that physical science concept, okay, they believed that something that simple couldn't be that important, so they dismissed it. But if you look at it more closely, you'll find that that particular membrane that's holding in that cytoplasm, the membrane is, what's the best way to put it? You can define it as in its biochemical terminology, is a liquid crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. Okay, the gates are receptors and channels are called channels. And the significance of that is that, you might say, wow, the cell membrane and the computer chip are exactly the same, or operate exactly the same way. And it's not an analogy, okay? It is exactly the same. Okay? The physical structure and function of a computer chip and that of a membrane operate exactly the same manner, no differences. So the cell is a programmable chip, and the nucleus is the disk, okay? And the membrane is an access device to select the programs and engage the system, okay? You can think of yourself, if you're typing on a computer, and then you realize the cell and the computer are the same thing, But the computer doesn't do anything unless I type on it. So then you'll start to realize that the cell has no behavior if it's disconnected from the environment. You cut the receptors off the surface of the cell, it's comatose. It just sits there, it does nothing. Once the receptors are back on the surface, okay, it then expresses behavior. Simple understanding. The base behavior of the cell is the environment, or what's involved with the membrane selecting the genes that the cells as a complement of the environment. So mechanical cellular biologists now understand that this is how the systems work. No two people have the same identity. Okay? Now, when I'm talking about identity, I'm talking about, if I take my cells out of me and I put it into you or someone else, your body will say, that's not self, that's not me, and it'll reject it. Okay? But if you understand that on the cell surface, all of our cells, there are a set of antennas, protein, glycoplasm. And a subset of those are called self-receptors. Self-receptors, that's actually what they're called. The self-receptors distinguish one identity from another. If you remove the self-receptors, the cell is generic. You can plant it into any person and attach their self-receptors to it. And then their body will say, oh, okay, self. And it won't reject the cells. Okay. So that helps us to appreciate that, the operation of the cell and cell transplant or organ transplant and how they prepare these things by replacing the self-receptors. But these are just antennas. Okay. But they're not just physical molecules. Okay. Because they're missing the point. Receptors means they're receivers. They're receiving something from somewhere. It's receiving different bands of information from the environment coming into it. So if you think of it strictly, materialistic, if your identity is being picked up from the environment, and my cell is here, all my cells, it makes no difference of anything, then you have to understand that my identity is being picked up and being played through this body, but myself is elsewhere. Okay? That the self is always immortal in the energy realm. The body comes and goes. Okay? Think of a rover that you send, a biologist once said this, Littman. You take a rover and you send it to Mars. Okay? It starts checking the environment, smell, taste, taking samples and rest, reading the environment. Okay? So the rover has these receptors to read the environment and pick up the information, the data. Okay? But the rover is not an isolated mechanism. It's being driven by someone back on Earth at NASA. And it's receiving information, it's not a one-way thing, and it's receiving information from the human back on Earth at NASA, and it does what it's doing and sends the information back to Earth. Okay. So it's just like we are Earth rovers, as Littman would say. because we are in this process of receiving data, what I smell, what I hear, what I see, what I taste, what I'm feeling, what I'm perceiving in this perceived reality. And that in turn is what I have, the information, all the information I have to discern and make sense out of this. Okay? So the spirit and the body are different. So why have both? Why both have a spirit and a body? Why not just be the spirit? But then you'd have to recognize that you wouldn't be able to enjoy a sunset. You wouldn't be able to enjoy a strawberry. You wouldn't be able to enjoy, kissing your sweetheart, making love. You would not be able to experience this in the same manner if you were not in a device that afforded you the ability to make sense out of this virtual reality. And it's by being in this matrix, so to speak, which is virtual, which is just consciousness, the subset, not the superset, but a perceived reality which moves at the speed of light, the constant c, in increments of time called delta t's. So now we're experiencing life, and in this classroom, learning those things that we need to in order to evolve within this greater evolving system towards love, towards the ultimate dynamic of love. And within this system, our system is not just Earth, it's the what we would call our universe, not just our galaxy, but our universe is a subsystem of the supersystem, because all of that is objective reality. Okay, even space is an objective reality. It's think of in Star Trek where they would go into the holodeck and start it up, and they would then perceive themselves to be in a different place and time. They would go in there and enjoy and play games and things, feeling as though they were actually having these realistic experiences. Go back and play like they were detectives, or you've seen probably in Star Trek, if any of you have ever been fans of it. And there was a room you could go in called the holodeck, which was holographic, and it would give you a imagery, which also converted perceptions of smell, touch, taste, feeling. It felt very real. But then they would just say, stop program, and everything would return to an empty holodeck. Okay. So what we're doing in this first very small entry into understanding reality is just dealing with the base 101 mechanics of the operational functionality of space-time. Okay. Haven't gotten into the metaphysical part of it yet, actually. But in order to step into that realm of metaphysics, we have to understand the physics. So what I've been trying to do is just give some of the basics relative to the physical operation of it all, so that we can begin the process of understanding those things we need to know to understand metaphysics. Okay? So we're here to experience this place, to feel love, to make decisions, to have wonderful food, and to do all the things to learn, and to have children. Okay? When you have a body, you can be creative. You can manifest. You can create your future, your reality, within this reality suit, this meat sock. And it affords us the ability to experience. And, so you're wondering, well, what is the source? But the source is not energy. That's the most important thing to understand. It's not physical. It's energy. Okay? So, when you understand quantum entanglement and interrelated interference patterns and things like that in physics, but by dabbling into it, you don't need to know everything about it as one with a doctoral would, okay? It helps you to understand, once you have gotten into that minutia and the understanding of it, you know now the mechanics of the physical operation of your particular perceived reality. Okay? So you are now in this video game. Let's just put it like that. Of course, it's not a video game. It's a perceived reality. But you have forgotten. Just like a dream. I'm trying to hold on to that sugar cube that water is running over. It dissolves very quickly. But nevertheless, those are the circumstances of the subset that we're in. Okay?